The laughter was the first thing Commander Elena Hayes noticed. Not the thousands of alien voices echoing through the Galactic Council chamber. Not the deep vibrations of ancient machinery beneath the station's surface. Not even the distant roar of the pulsar outside, a dying star whose violent energy painted the darkness with endless waves of blue fire. It was the laughter. Cold. Arrogant. Endless. It rolled across the chamber like a weapon. Elena stood alone beneath the massive holographic dome of the Celestial Assembly, surrounded by beings who had watched civilizations rise and disappear before humanity had even discovered faster-than-light travel. Above her floated the representatives of over 300 worlds, each seated upon their own elevated platforms of crystal, metal, and living technology. Their symbols of power rotated behind them like miniature galaxies. To them, this was not a meeting. It was a performance. And humanity had been invited to play the role of the fool. The human delegation platform was painfully small compared to the towering structures surrounding it. A simple alloy surface. No golden decorations. No ancient symbols carved into its frame. No display of superiority. Just a woman in a dark military uniform, holding a transparent data prism in her hand. Commander Elena Hayes. Earth's first official ambassador to the Galactic Council. And perhaps its last. The alien delegates watched her with amusement. Some whispered through encrypted channels. Others openly projected their thoughts into the chamber, allowing everyone nearby to hear their contempt. A species that has existed for barely 3 centuries among the stars believes it understands threats we have studied for millennia? The voice belonged to Lord Varric of the Thalorian Dominion, an ancient reptilian empire that had controlled nearly 1,000 systems before humanity had even reached Mars. His massive armored body leaned forward, his golden eyes narrowing with amusement. "You claim our predictions are wrong," he continued. "You claim your primitive instruments discovered something our greatest minds overlooked?" A wave of laughter followed. Elena heard every sound. She heard the clicking mandibles of insectoid diplomats. The low mechanical hum of artificial intelligences processing the moment. The soft whispers of alien nobles already preparing their next joke. But she did not move. She did not react. Because she knew something they did not. The galaxy was about to learn the difference between confidence and arrogance. Her fingers rested calmly against the side of the data prism. Inside that small device was information that had cost humanity everything to obtain. Thousands of unmanned probes destroyed. Entire research stations abandoned. Scientists who spent their final moments sending one last warning before their signals vanished into the darkness. Humanity had not come to the Council because it wanted recognition. It had come because people were going to die. Millions. Billions. Entire civilizations. And the Council was too proud to listen. Elena Hayes, announced the Council speaker, a towering being of silver energy contained within a crystalline shell, "Your request for emergency galactic action has been reviewed and rejected." The chamber grew louder. Rejected. A single word that carried the weight of entire worlds. "You have provided insufficient evidence," the speaker continued. "Your warnings are based on incomplete human calculations. The Council will not destabilize galactic order because of the fears of a young species." Fears. That word echoed inside Elena's mind. She thought about Earth. About the cities beneath blue skies. About children who would never know the stars were dangerous. About the people who trusted her to stand here and speak when humanity had no voice. Slowly, she lifted her eyes toward the countless alien faces watching her. For a moment, the laughter faded. Not because they understood. But because they sensed something different. A calmness. A certainty. Elena looked down at the prism in her hand and quietly activated the final sequence. No alarm sounded. No dramatic announcement followed. Just a tiny pulse of light. A message sent. A decision already made. The Council believed humanity had come here begging for help. They were wrong. Humanity had come to give them one final chance. And when the stars began to go dark moments later, every being in that chamber would remember the exact moment they stopped laughing. Commander Elena Hayes had traveled farther than any human before her. 40,000 light-years away from Earth. Past the familiar borders of human exploration. Past the silent graves of abandoned colonies and the forgotten remains of civilizations that had vanished before humanity ever knew they existed. Now she stood at the center of the galaxy's greatest symbol of power, the Celestial Assembly, a colossal artificial world built around the dying star Virex 9. From a distance, the station looked impossible. A city carved from light and metal, stretching across thousands of kilometers of empty space. Massive rings rotated around its core, each one containing entire ecosystems designed for different species. Crystal forests grew inside transparent domes. Artificial oceans floated in zero gravity. Towers made of living alloys changed shape according to the needs of their inhabitants. The station was not built. It was evolved. Every civilization that entered its orbit saw something different. To the machine species, it was the greatest achievement of engineering ever created. To the ancient alien empires, it was a monument to their dominance. To humanity, it was a reminder. A reminder that they were young. Very young. Compared to the ancient powers gathered inside, Earth was nothing more than a newborn child reaching toward a universe that had already written millions of chapters. Elena felt that weight the moment she stepped onto the council floor. The atmosphere changed instantly. Hundreds of alien eyes turned toward her. Some studied her with curiosity. Others with suspicion. Many with quiet amusement. Humanity was still considered an unknown variable. A species that had arrived late to the galactic stage. A species that had developed faster than light travel only decades earlier while others had crossed galaxies before Earth's first cities were built. But Elena knew something those civilizations often forgot. Age did not always determine strength. Sometimes survival did. She adjusted her uniform as she walked toward the human delegation platform. The material was simple compared to the glowing armor and ceremonial robes worn by the other ambassadors. No gemstones. No ancient markings. No symbols representing conquered worlds. Only the emblem of Earth on her shoulder. Blue oceans. Green continents. A small planet surrounded by darkness. A planet that had spent thousands of years fighting itself before finally looking upward and realizing the universe was much bigger than its own conflicts. Elena carried that history with her. She carried every scientist who had worked until exhaustion studying the impossible signals coming from the edge of known space. She carried every pilot who had risked their lives traveling beyond safe routes. She carried every person on Earth waiting for answers that might decide the future of their species. The mission was simple. Deliver the warning. Convince the Council. Save as many lives as possible. But standing there beneath the enormous holographic ceiling, surrounded by beings who controlled entire star systems, Elena understood something important. This was never going to be a normal diplomatic meeting. The Council had not invited humanity because they respected them. They had invited humanity because they wanted to judge them. Above her, the holographic representation of the galaxy slowly rotated. Millions of stars burned like tiny sparks across the chamber's ceiling. Each one represented a world. A civilization. A population that believed tomorrow would arrive just like every other day. But Elena knew better. She had seen the data. She had seen the patterns. Something was moving through the darkness between the stars. Something ancient. Something that did not negotiate. Something that did not care about borders, alliances, or the pride of powerful civilizations. She tightened her grip around the data prism containing humanity's discovery. The Council might have forgotten Earth was new. They might have mistaken youth for weakness. But humanity had learned one lesson during its short journey into space. The universe did not reward the strongest. It rewarded the ones who adapted. And as Elena looked across the impossible chamber filled with the galaxy's most powerful beings, she prepared herself for the moment they would finally understand why humanity had come. Not to ask for a place among the stars, but to warn them that the stars were no longer safe. The silence that followed Elena's presentation lasted only a heartbeat. Then the disbelief began. Towering holographic displays blossomed above the council floor, projecting humanity's calculations into the center of the chamber. Endless streams of equations spiraled through the air, layered with star charts, gravitational maps, and sensor recordings gathered from the darkest reaches of explored space. To human scientists, the evidence formed an unmistakable pattern. To the Galactic Council, it was considered an error. A crystalline delegate raised a shimmering limb, scattering tiny prisms of light across the chamber. Your observations contradict every known model of stellar physics. Another ambassador, a machine intelligence whose metallic body hummed with quantum processors older than human civilization itself, answered before Elena could speak. Our predictive networks have analyzed this region continuously for 8,000 years. Probability of the proposed event, 0.00001%. The chamber filled with approving murmurs. One by one, representatives activated their own sensor archives. Every result agreed. Nothing was coming. Nothing existed. Nothing threatened the galaxy. To them, humanity's warning was nothing more than mathematical paranoia. Elena remained perfectly still. She had expected this. Because Earth's own computers had rejected the discovery too. The first observatory dismissed it as corrupted telemetry. The second blamed quantum interference. The third erased the anomaly entirely, automatically filtering it out as impossible background noise. Only after months of investigation had one exhausted astrophysicist made a terrifying realization. Their instruments weren't malfunctioning. They were obeying their programming. Every advanced system in the galaxy had become so efficient that it automatically discarded impossible observations before anyone ever saw them. Humanity had found the truth only because some of their oldest telescopes were still imperfect. Old enough. Primitive enough. To record what sophisticated technology refused to believe. Elena's fingers tightened around the edge of the podium. She remembered the faces of those scientists. Sleep-deprived. Terrified. Watching one distant research station after another disappear without sending distress calls. Not destroyed. Simply gone. As though reality itself had swallowed them. The council speaker floated higher above the assembly, his radiant silver form illuminating the chamber. Commander Hayes, his voice echoed through every level of the station, the Galactic Council appreciates humanity's concern. However, extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. More laughter rippled across the audience. Some delegates had already lost interest. Others quietly resumed private conversations. To them, the meeting was over. Elena glanced upward. Hidden behind the calm expression on her face, a tiny countdown flickered across her retinal implant. 4:17. 4 minutes. 17 seconds. That was all the time remaining. Hidden far beyond the council's immense detection grid, something impossible was racing through folded space. Not a fleet. Not a weapon. Not a living organism. Something far older. A gravitational wound that bent dimensions around itself, consuming stars without explosions, planets without debris, entire civilizations without leaving a single distress signal behind. It did not conquer. It erased. Earth's deep space probes had tracked its impossible trajectory for nearly 6 months. Every calculation reached the same horrifying conclusion. Its next destination. Council territory. Elena inhaled slowly. She wanted to argue. To force them to listen. To scream if necessary. But experience had already taught humanity a painful lesson. Facts alone never defeated arrogance. The chamber felt almost peaceful now. Blue plasma rivers flowed behind transparent walls. Ancient banners drifted weightlessly above the delegates. Music from distant diplomatic ceremonies echoed faintly through the colossal station. Everything appeared perfectly normal. Beautiful. Safe. Yet Elena knew every second of that peaceful illusion was slipping away. She looked once more across the thousands of representatives filling the assembly. Powerful empires. Ancient monarchies. Machine civilizations. Species that had survived millions of years. None of them realized they were already standing on the edge of history. The countdown reached 4 minutes. Then 3:59. 3:58. Elena lowered her eyes to the data prism resting quietly in her hand. The evacuation protocols were ready. Earth's hidden fleets were already moving into position beyond the Council's sensors. Humanity had prepared for the possibility that no one would believe them. Because sometimes, the hardest part of saving lives wasn't defeating the coming disaster. It was convincing the powerful that the disaster was real. And somewhere beyond the stars. The darkness kept coming. The first sign that something was wrong was not the alarm. It was the silence. For one impossible moment, the entire celestial assembly became completely still. The endless conversations stopped. The diplomatic channels went quiet. The laughter vanished. Every creature inside the chamber looked toward the massive panoramic windows surrounding the station, expecting to see the familiar blue flames of Virex 9's pulsar burning beyond the glass. Instead, they saw nothing. Not darkness. Not an eclipse. Nothing. The stars had disappeared. A wave of confusion moved through the chamber as thousands of sensors activated at once. Alien technicians rushed to their consoles. Artificial intelligences awakened from dormant states. Ancient civilizations that had survived for millions of years suddenly found themselves facing a phenomenon their greatest minds could not classify. Then the alarms began. Not one alarm. Thousands. Every warning system across the celestial assembly screamed simultaneously. Red emergency symbols flooded the holographic displays. Gravitational readings spiked beyond measurable limits. Navigation systems failed. Communication networks collapsed into static. The station's advanced predictive engines attempted to calculate the threat. And failed. For the first time in recorded history, the galaxy's most advanced machines had no answer. The impossible had arrived. Lord Varric, who moments earlier had laughed at humanity's warning, stood frozen on his elevated platform. His golden eyes stared at the empty space beyond the windows. No. The word escaped him quietly. Not as disbelief. As fear. Because somewhere deep inside the ancient instincts of every civilization present, they understood one terrifying truth. Something had entered their territory. Something that did not announce itself. Something that did not negotiate. Something that simply erased everything in its path. Across the chamber, emergency reports appeared one after another. A colony world in the outer sectors had stopped responding. A military outpost had vanished from the network. A research station containing billions of years of accumulated knowledge had gone silent. No explosion. No battle. No warning. Just absence. Entire civilizations were disappearing between one transmission and the next. Elena watched the panic spread. But she did not feel satisfaction. She did not feel anger. She only felt the crushing weight of knowing she had been right. She had wanted them to listen before this moment. She had wanted them to believe before fear forced them to. The council speaker turned toward her, his radiant form flickering as his energy system struggled under the station-wide emergency. Commander Hayes. For the first time, his voice carried uncertainty. What is happening? Elena looked around the chamber. The same beings who had dismissed humanity moments earlier were now searching for answers from the species they considered primitive. She slowly lifted the data prism. The device projected a massive holographic map above the assembly. A path of destruction stretched across the galaxy. Thousands of star systems. Thousands of civilizations. A trail of silence moving faster than any fleet could escape. The chamber fell quiet. Every delegate watched as the final piece of humanity's warning became visible. The anomaly was not approaching. It was already here. Then Elena revealed the truth that shocked them even more. The reason your sensors could not detect it, she said calmly, is because your technology was never designed to recognize something that should not exist. The hologram shifted. Images appeared of human probes entering the anomaly's path. Ancient machines. Simple by galactic standards. Inefficient. Outdated. But they had survived. They had recorded what no other civilization could see. Your systems removed the data because it was impossible, Elena continued. Humanity discovered it because we learned long ago that impossible things are often the ones worth investigating. No one laughed. No one moved. The greatest powers in the galaxy stood frozen as a terrifying realization spread among them. Humanity had not been warning them about a future disaster. Humanity had been warning them about a disaster that had already begun. Outside the station, the darkness continued to expand. And for the first time in thousands of years, the Galactic Council was afraid. The galaxy had always believed humanity was fragile. A young species. A reckless species. A civilization that survived not because it was powerful, but because it was lucky. But as the darkness consumed star systems one after another, the universe witnessed something it had never expected. Humanity did not run. The moment the Council finally accepted the truth, Earth's hidden response began. Across the empty spaces between galaxies, dormant human fleets awakened. For months, thousands of ships had been waiting in silence beyond known sensor ranges. They had no grand markings. No ancient weapons. No symbols of conquest. They were not designed to intimidate. They were designed to save. One by one, their engines ignited. The darkness of space erupted with the blue-white glow of human technology as rescue vessels folded through dimensions that even the oldest civilizations struggled to understand. They appeared around collapsing worlds, carrying evacuation systems, medical platforms, and quantum gateways capable of moving billions of lives across impossible distances. The alien fleets watched in disbelief. They had expected humanity to demand recognition. They had expected revenge. They had expected the young species to remind them of every insult, every rejection, every moment of arrogance inside the council chamber. Instead, humanity sent help. The first transmission from Earth reached every surviving world at once. No threats. No accusations. Only one message. We are coming. Hold on. Those words traveled farther than any weapon ever had. On the surface of dying planets, alien populations looked toward their skies and saw unfamiliar ships descending through burning atmospheres. Some feared them at first. They had heard the stories. They knew humanity was different. But then the human crews opened their doors. They carried injured strangers into their ships. They shared resources with civilizations that had once refused to acknowledge them. They fought for worlds that had never fought for them. Because humanity understood something the galaxy had forgotten. Survival was never about who deserved to live. It was about choosing to protect life when you had the power to do so. Inside the celestial assembly, chaos transformed into determination. The greatest civilizations in existence had technology that was older and more advanced than anything Earth possessed. But when they attempted to create evacuation corridors, their systems failed under the anomaly's influence. The human solution was different. It was imperfect. It was risky. It required millions of calculations, constant adjustments, and pilots willing to fly into collapsing space itself. But it worked. Because humanity had never been afraid of impossible problems. They had been solving them since the beginning. Commander Elena Hayes stood aboard the command vessel Horizon, watching the anomaly approach on the tactical display. The shape of it was no longer theoretical. It filled the edge of the galaxy like a storm made from darkness itself. Behind her, alien officers worked beside human engineers. Former enemies. Former doubters. Now survivors. A young alien technician looked at Elena through the reflection of the command window. "Why are you doing this?" the creature asked quietly. "After everything we said, after everything we did, why save us?" Elena looked out at the stars. She thought about Earth. About the billions waiting beneath distant skies. About humanity's long history of conflict, mistakes, and suffering. Then she answered. "Because if we only protect those who respect us, then we are no better than the ones who refuse to listen." The final evacuation gates opened. The anomaly reached the outer systems. Ships disappeared into the darkness. But humanity remained. Thousands of human pilots stayed behind, holding the quantum corridors stable long enough for the last refugees to escape. They knew the risk. They knew some of them would not return. Yet none turned away. Across the galaxy, alien civilizations watched as the youngest species stood against the oldest threat. Not with the largest army. Not with the strongest weapons. But with courage. And as the darkness closed around them, the universe finally understood the truth. Humanity was never dangerous because of what it could destroy. Humanity was dangerous because even at the edge of extinction, it would still choose to fight for everyone. The galaxy remembered the silence. Not the silence of fear. Not the silence of destruction. But the silence that came after the impossible had ended. For the first time in centuries, the stars were calm. The darkness that had consumed entire civilizations had finally stopped moving. The anomaly that no empire, no machine intelligence, and no ancient species could understand had been pushed back by a civilization that many had considered insignificant. Humanity. Days passed after the final evacuation. The celestial assembly was no longer the same place. The towering platforms of ancient empires remained suspended above the chamber floor, but something had changed. The symbols of superiority that once filled the hall seemed smaller now. The voices that once carried arrogance now carried humility. The greatest civilizations in the galaxy had gathered again. Not to judge humanity. Not to question its intentions. But to honor it. Commander Elena Hayes stood where she had stood before. Beneath the same beam of white light. On the same simple human platform. But this time, there was no laughter. No whispers. No mocking voices. Only silence. A silence filled with respect. Around her, representatives from worlds older than Earth lowered their heads. Ancient rulers who had commanded fleets across thousands of systems. Machine minds that had calculated every possible future. Species that believed they had already witnessed every form of greatness. They had all learned the same lesson. Power was not measured by how long a civilization had existed. It was measured by what that civilization chose to do when everything was at risk. The Thalorian Dominion, once among humanity's loudest critics, was the first to speak. Lord Varric stepped forward slowly. The same being who had laughed at Elena's warning now carried something different in his expression. Not shame. Not defeat. Understanding. "Your species was underestimated," he said. Elena looked at him silently. The words were simple. But for a galaxy built on pride, they carried enormous weight. Humanity had not conquered anyone. It had not demanded territory. It had not forced the galaxy to kneel. It had simply stood between life and extinction. And that changed everything. Across thousands of worlds, stories spread. Not about Earth's weapons. Not about its technology. But about its people. Stories of human pilots who flew into collapsing space corridors to save strangers. Engineers who worked beside alien species they had never met before. Medical teams that treated enemies and allies with the same compassion. A civilization that had arrived among the stars carrying all the flaws of its past. Yet still chose to protect the future. Years later, children across distant planets would learn about the moment the galaxy almost ended. They would learn about the ancient empires that failed to see the danger. They would learn about the council that laughed. And they would learn about the humans who answered that laughter with action. But perhaps the most important lesson was not about humanity's strength. It was about humanity's choice. Because the universe had seen countless powerful civilizations rise and fall. It had seen conquerors. It had seen tyrants. It had seen species with unimaginable abilities use them only for themselves. But then humanity arrived. A young species. A stubborn species. A species that carried scars from its own world yet still believed life was worth protecting. As Elena watched the stars from the observation deck of the rebuilt Council station, she saw countless lights shining in the distance. Worlds that still existed because someone had refused to give up. She smiled quietly. Humanity had never wanted a throne among the stars. It had never wanted to rule the galaxy. It only wanted to prove one thing. That even in the darkest moment, even when the universe itself seemed ready to fall, someone had to stand. And when everyone else looked away, humanity looked into the darkness and said, "Not today."